It's definitely a buzzword these days. Obviously, we're not literally participating in the Homesteading Act, but what are we doing? Hi there, my name is Geneva. Welcome to the Toss and Eva channel, where I share about what is possible in marriage, taking food into your own hands, and living well in our modern world. Today I wanted to talk about something that I think is actually could be a very broad subject, and I'm by no means going to attempt to cover every single possibility here, but I do want to share about how my husband Thomas and I have been homesteading in the suburbs. Now, first off, what do we even mean by this word homesteading, using this word? It's definitely a buzzword these days. Obviously, we're not literally participating in the Homesteading Act, where you can, at certain times in certain territories of this country, go get a plot of land, occupy it in a certain way, improve it in a certain way, and then call it yours. But what are we doing? When I'm going to use the word homesteading, I'm referring to an intentional effort to both use any space you have available around you, maybe in your yard, or access to the outdoors, access to the world and the natural resources available to you on whatever piece of land or area that you own or have access to, even if you're renting. So, and with that, what are you doing with it? I'm talking about an intentional effort to cultivate things there, to produce food there, to do things in a way that gather natural resources and make them available for your use. Along those same lines, I also include anything that you do with the resources that you get from other people, not just what you are directly creating yourself, but who are you patronizing? How are they gathering resources? How are you sourcing the things that you eat and wear and use? What sort of craftsmanship or what sort of industry are you participating in? So that's the context. Hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity as to why I'm claiming that we are homesteading in the suburbs. And I'm sure there's lots of different definitions that you could have for the meaning of that word. So happy to have a conversation about that in the comments or anything like that. Right now, I'm actually not filming from where I live in the suburbs. I'm actually visiting my in-laws, Thomas's parents, and I'm located at the back of their property. Now, they are actually in the suburbs. From their house, you have a view of the town and also the major freeway in the area. But they just happen to be located in a spot in the suburbs that I would say is backed up against some bigger, slightly more rural properties. So they're kind of like on the edge of things. But a point I really want to make is that I really believe wherever you are, I think we each have more space and more resources and more things that we can do available to us than we may realize. Now, I also want to create that I really understand sometimes there are life circumstances, including maybe where you live, that really do mean you don't have a lot of these options at your disposal. For example, when Thomas and I were both working corporate jobs and commuting like crazy and running around all over the Bay Area, we really didn't have the resources both in our time and in just the space that we had to do much of anything. Now, as I'll get into when I talk about these different subjects, we could have definitely taken steps to intentionally source the things we were eating and what we were using in our life and support people who do produce things in a more homesteady way. But for example, in terms of our being able to produce anything directly with the space we had access to, you know, we kept houseplants. So by all means, we probably could have grown, you know, herbs in the kitchen windowsill and stuff like that. But for example, one time I put our houseplants outside to take them on vacation, is what we call it. And within about 10 minutes of me putting them out on the balcony that we had access to, because of the restrictions of the apartment we were living in, we got a text from the property manager saying, you can't do that. So I know what it's like to not have the resources both in your space and your time and your lifestyle to be able to do much of anything that I'm going to talk about here. But I also firmly believe that if it's a priority for you, there are things you can do to move the needle and get your life tracked more in that direction. Be it the next time you rent an apartment, making sure it's one with a balcony where you can put plants. Or the next time you find an apartment or a place to live, having it be a priority that you find some sort of yard. I just think there are always things that can be done, even beyond what may initially meet the eye. All that being said, I do have a list of specific things that we've been able to do over the last couple of years while we've been renting and living in the suburbs. As I talk about these different things, I will include, as much as I can, clips from our life of us doing these things so that as much as possible you can see literally what it looks like. Now, one way that I've learned to think about how to homestead immediately, wherever you are, however much access to the outside that you have, is to start with food and think about your food system, what you're eating, where you're getting it, how you're preparing it, and how much you have on hand. And this is by no means something that I made up. I don't take any credit for it. I have learned this from the people that I follow in the homesteading world. And it's both something that Thomas and I started doing naturally because we had health goals around what we were eating and the sources of the food we were eating. But then it became something that really made this more old-fashioned, more traditional homesteading lifestyle that much more available to us. So probably the very easiest way to start this, again, no matter where you live, is to cook from scratch. And just either, maybe not even entirely from scratch, but just to increase the amount of food you cook from scratch and you manage yourself. So getting raw, plain ingredients that you are the processor of to turn it into nutritious, simply processed food for you and your family. And again, like I said, we started doing this based on health concerns. In particular, we started first on an anti-parasitic rotation diet. So being very specific about what sort of meats we were consuming, how they had been produced, and very conscious to consume organic produce and food that had been minimally processed and preserved by other people. There is an entire world, there are worlds obviously around meat production, around food preservation and additives, and each and every one of these things could be a very robust subject to look into, and that's what we started doing. And we found that we just wanted to go gung-ho on sourcing more pure, organic, natural, all the good things products for what we were putting into our body based on the health concerns we had at the time. I personally went from eating many canned and frozen meals from the grocery store every week while I was working to cooking most everything from scratch. These days, it is definitely distinct when we either get food from a restaurant or purchase and eat a pre-made meal. And not to say that there's anything wrong with doing that, but it does make a difference for your body what things are in your food and how it was made and how the animal grew up and was raised and was fed. And it's night and day. If you have any health concern, even beyond just your desire for a certain lifestyle or certain ethical choices, if you have health concerns, I really would urge you to start with that as a foundation, and along with anything else you may be doing to just really give your body a good chance to be built out of good things. Anyway, that's a slight side note. Along with cooking from scratch, what things in particular have we started making for ourselves? In addition to most of the dishes that we consume, there are a few things that we have started keeping on hand that we now do for ourselves. And we're not perfect at this, but it is a goal of ours, and I would say either the majority of the time or at least a decent share of the time for each of these different things, we are the ones who make them from the raw ingredients, which I definitely take a lot of pride in, and it's been feeling really good. These include yogurt, which we make here and there from raw milk that we have been sourcing from a local provider. We have been a part of a herd share program to contribute to taking care of the herd of cows that this family farm has, and in return, because we help, fund their care, we receive part of the product that they produce, which is their raw milk. We have seriously enjoyed it. It's, again, a whole other topic that I could go into. For me, I thought I couldn't drink milk. I thought it caused me terrible stomach upset, and for a time it actually really did, at least to the best of my ability. Every time I consumed milk, I could link it to not feeling well. But I would say, combined with the other measures that I've taken over the last couple of years to improve my health and my body's foundation, plus having it be raw milk, they basically, we got to tour the facility, meet the people, meet the cows. It was wonderful. And they basically, the milk goes from the cow to a bucket on ice to a jar in the fridge, and that's how it's processed. And it's really been amazing. Okay, sauerkraut. I feel like sauerkraut is having a heyday right now, probably only eclipsed by sourdough bread. So we try to do both. I got a giant sauerkraut or any fermentation crock for Christmas this year from my parents, and we have had a lot of fun making enormous batches. They last us for weeks and weeks and weeks of sauerkraut from scratch at home. So it's very simple. There are definitely loads of tutorials on how to make it, and obviously it's a probiotic food. It is very easy to manage and store, and we try to eat it at most every meal, or at least every day. And sourdough bread, of course, sourdough bread. I started my sourdough starter about 10 months ago now, and I converted it to einkorn flour and have been to various degrees of success making loaves of bread with it for a while now. I have personally found, as an amateur, very beginner bread maker, that there seem to be any number of ways, depending on who you ask and what flour they're using and all that jazz, if you're gonna knead the bread, or if you're not gonna knead the bread, or if you're gonna bake it in a loaf pan, or if you're gonna bake it in a bowl, or if you're going to score it right before it goes in the oven, or score it as it, before it rises. I really have found that there's probably as many bread recipes as there are people who publish bread recipes, if not multiple recipes and techniques per person who talks about it. So wherever you are around sourdough, if you're thinking of doing it, I would highly recommend it. It works, it tastes great, it feels good, but also just don't get discouraged if there's literally infinite options of how to do it. Honestly, I think it just takes picking one to start with, knowing that it might not go well, A, because you're a beginner, B, because maybe that recipe and technique isn't a good fit for you or your environment or whatnot. But I really just think it takes picking one, trying it. If it comes out good enough for you to try it again, do so. If it doesn't, or you didn't enjoy the process or the results, just move on, try a new recipe, try a new technique. Literally, I think you could probably try a new bread recipe every week until you die, and I just wouldn't worry about it. I've found a couple so far that if I follow their directions and their proportion for the recipe, I at least know what it will produce from my skills in executing it in my sourdough starter in my environment. So that's where I've sort of settled, and then whenever I feel like it, I try out a new recipe or a new technique. Thomas really loves the bread that it produces. I do too. I don't like using it for everything because there are some things that I like a certain texture or size or shape of bread for, but that has been a huge thing to take into our own hands and just really feel like we are the owners of, and we know exactly what went in it and how it was processed, and the results that it yields for our health. Probably one of the biggest, most cool homesteady feeling things that we've been able to do while living in the suburbs is to keep chickens. Now, I know that this highly depends on what sort of situation you're in. We actually have been living with my parents in the neighborhoods outside of Portland, Oregon, and there you are allowed to have what I believe 4 chickens. I hope that is correct because that's what we have, and I don't want anybody to come after us. So, anyway. So we don't have any roosters. We have 4 laying hens. We got them from somebody in the area surrounding our town, and they were about a year old when we got them. So, you know, had gotten into the prime of their laying, and it's been really cool. It's been really cool to care for them. It's been really cool to collect their eggs and eat them and see, like, just literally how they're made. See how what we feed them affects, you know, the strength of the shell or the color, and see how, also too, how they fit into the cycle and ecosystem of our life and our household, how we get to feed them kitchen scraps, how they, we haven't used them a whole lot for like chicken power in the garden or anything like that, but that is also a whole world you could get into. It's really cool to just see how these cycles can complete themselves sometimes. So obviously, not everybody can have chickens, but if you can, I would highly recommend it. If you can't, I would highly recommend finding somebody near you who can and does have chickens and patronizing their egg business if they offer it. Okay, another huge realm in how to homestead wherever you live, but particularly say you're renting or you're in the suburbs, is gardening. What, if anything, can you grow yourself from whatever space you have available to you? Now, like I said before, we've had times where that has looked like the possibility, if we could even had enough bandwidth in our lifestyle to manage it, but the possibility of, say, growing herbs in the kitchen windowsill. I would say, like, start there, or even things that don't require a traditional growing space or container. You can sprout seeds, you can grow like little shoots, little microgreens, very easily. And in particular, if they are only growing for a few days or a week or two before you consume them, it's very easy to sort of make a makeshift system for doing that. You don't have to have grow lights or a whole setup or even a yard to really do certain things. Since we've been living in the suburbs with my parents over the last year, we have been able to both take advantage of what was already planted in their yard, and we've had the opportunity to create a couple of additional garden areas. And we've mostly done this with containers. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this video is when you source your food and lifestyle products from other people. Now, obviously, natural things, organic things, healthy things, all that jazz is kind of having a heyday as a trend in the culture, which I think largely is a really good thing, but also it can mean sometimes things are just advertised in a certain way and they don't actually offer the distinct benefits that you might be looking for. So definitely learn to read labels for whatever you are purchasing from the store or anybody else. And I think any sort of relationship that you can actually strike up with a producer or a source is a really good thing. I, in particular, around getting the raw milk that we've been getting, I love driving to their farm. I grew up like 15 minutes away from there, so it's very nostalgic for me to go out to that part of the country. And B, I love talking to the woman who runs the farm. I just kind of want to be her when I grow up. And and even aside from that, I really appreciate just getting to be in touch with the person who is producing that part of my diet. Now, aside from that, there is also just purely the what are you getting when you buy something from somebody else. And obviously there are a gajillion resources for how to get good, natural, local, organic, grass-fed foods, probably wherever you live, hopefully with our shipping systems these days. But obviously it is going to vary by location. Now, obviously, there are different places to source your food from. There are services you can order from online, like Azure Standard, that deliver to you or an area near you. There are your local producers, your farmers markets, your natural food stores, even your conventional grocery stores that have a natural section, or organic items, or a meat produced to an elevated standard. There really are a lot of different ways, so you could even begin this process by just starting wherever you typically shop and just slightly altering the priorities that you place on what you buy. That's something that Thomas and I have each been doing since like college, before we knew each other, before we were fully on this journey, when we just knew it was important to do what we could to get ourselves better food items to consume. So that is what I will share with you today. Obviously, any number of the things that I mentioned are like a whole world in and of themselves and could be the subject of many videos and I'm sure they are from other people already. So if anything that I've mentioned today inspires you or sparks your curiosity, or has you think, hey, I know I could take that on, please do. Please learn more. Please look to more people who have more experience than I do, who are talking about these things. In particular, I'll list a few people that I have really followed closely, or just been completely inspired by, or learned a lot from over the last few years since I've really taken an interest in this topic. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed and maybe found some information or inspiration helpful. Please keep watching and subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more from me on marriage, taking food into your own hands, and living well. I'll see you next time. Include anything that you do now, to think about what you can do and to think about how to homesteading. So getting what do I really want to say here?